unceremoniously dumped into your bed from above
Yes.
by the abductors in the night. We won't mention who they are right now. Could you sort of fill in the details of, first of all, what year that happened in?
I suppose it was around 2000 and 2001. And I also would like to say Joe makes me sound like Superwoman, but I'm not. I'm just average woman who happens to have had an extraordinary experience.
Yes.
The night you're talking about, I was awakened because my head and shoulder hit the bed very hard, like I'd been dropped from about 2 feet up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened my eyes, and there was a gray in my face, just inches away. I actually felt his breath on my skin, and I was terrified. This is very hard to talk about sometimes because, let's face it, we're talking about alien abduction.
Yes.
My first reaction was to turn over and get away from this thing in my face. But when I tried to do that, I realized the rest of me was still suspended in the air, being held by at least 2 other ones. And I jerked my legs away from them and rolled over and went back to sleep. Which you think, okay, so you just had this horrible experience. Why did you go back to sleep? But I found out later that's kind of typical. You just go back to sleep, and they hope you don't remember what happened in the morning. However, I did. When I woke up, I remembered. I made a cup of coffee. My adult son was here. I told him what happened. I think I said I had the weirdest dream last night. And I told him all that I'd seen, and he said, "Mom, those weren't aliens. Those were demons." And the light bulb went off in my head.
Right. Now, how old was your son when he was observing this?
Oh, he's an adult. He's grown, married, long since moved out. I mean, he wasn't a little boy.
Okay. Right. Okay, so it's not just a little boy observing something and making a statement. He obviously must have had a reason for saying what he did.
Well, we have a good relationship, and I think he knew that I was sorely affected by what had happened. And we are very frank with each other, so I think he just, it occurred to him, the truth of the matter occurred to him. And he told me, and it was like I so totally understood it, all of it at that point. It was terrifying.
Okay.
I knew enough about alien abduction to know that they were doing horrible things to me if they were taking me in my sleep at night.
Right. Okay, well, that brings us to the next logical question, I guess, Cathy. How did you go about exploring for the truth of what happened to you when you got the sense that these entities were up to no good, i.e. potentially demons? You couldn't prove it at the point, but what did you do? How did you go about trying to focus on that aspect of it at that point after the dumping incident?
I went to the library first. I literally sat in the aisle and pulled every book off the shelf so that I could find anything to do with alien abduction. I couldn't find anything on how to make it stop. I mean, there was a couple of people that said, it had stopped when they resisted or they had gotten away, but nothing that really seemed like an answer to me, nothing I could put my hands on and make work for me. So I came home, got on the internet, looked some more, and I came across Joe Jordan's website. And I think I called him on the phone because it was like, the heck with email. I want to talk to this guy now. And
well, you lived in the same general area, I guess, huh?
Yes, we were within a couple of hours of each other, so.
Right, okay.
I got really determined to make it stop, make it go away. A lot of things started going through my mind. I remembered my boy told me when he was little he'd had this dream about a really tall, skinny man who'd taken him for a walk down the street, and he had described him in pretty good detail for, a little guy. Well, here it is, years and years later, and I've had this experience, and now I've read enough to know that it'd probably been happening to him too, and that made me extremely angry, livid
Angry.
anger. How
Angry
dare they
at the
touch my
mother.
children?
Right, exactly. I understand. By the way, do you think there was any reason that you may have been, and I'll use the word selectively, but since you've been, besides a manager in a medical supply company, and I read you were also a singer and a musician, and you even were involved with stock car racing for a little bit, so you had a little bit of a varied experience, and I'm wondering, to myself, when I'm reading this, I said, is there anything about Cathy that would fit the profile of the type of person that they would kind of go after for a particular reason to fit their agenda? Do you have any thoughts about that at all?
Well, there's a lot of theory about them picking people because there are generational doors having been opened to the occult.
Mm-hmm.
Your parents, your grandparents, whatever, have been in secret societies or dabbled in the occult, and they open the door for this to happen to you. I can't prove that, but it was the case in my case, and pretty much everybody I've talked to had something. They were dabbling in the occult themselves, or their parents, had opened doors unaware. So, quite possibly, it's a generational thing.
Yes. Okay. Well, the reason I asked that question is because we once had a person of our knowing, Maria Cuccia, who had given testimony about what happened to her. And she had one of these situations where she had a miscarriage within the first 3 months back in 1984. But she had documentation that the doctors couldn't find out anything that would have indicated she was even pregnant, much less a miscarriage. So she was very puzzled about that. And then 8 years later, she was shown a boy who they said he was probably the same type of alien beings that you had encountered, that this was your son, Elijah. And it would have been about 8 years later from the time she had the miscarriage. So she put two and two together. And I bring that up only because she was a musician, meaning that she was a piano teacher. And subsequently, as far as Maria's testimony went, they had tried to tap in to get her to change from being a piano player to start a full production company that was revolved around transcendental meditation music, which she went along with for a while. And because I had known her, and I actually saw the tapes that she was putting out, and she was meeting these people, it seemed coincidentally, that just happened to be the kind of people she would need to start a production company, because she didn't know about that type of stuff. So when I say targeted, I wonder sometimes that the talents that you may have had, or still have, can be used unbeknownst to you by these dark forces that might have an agenda, and you really don't know what the half of it is. Now, I found out my own.
I never dismiss their devious, ingenious tactics. And, as far as the women, common experience is that they're raped by aliens or impregnated by aliens, and then they take their babies away from them later and show them to them, years down the road. It's all a trick. I mean, how do you get to a woman? You appeal to her motherly instincts, because they're the strongest instincts she has.
Right.
So she's bound by those instincts. She can't even resist those instincts. So that's what they target.
Right.